Hello and welcome to the Daily Mill for Saturday the 22nd of July 2023. In today's Millwall news, it was match day. First team didn't have a match today. It was actually under 21s, but they relabeled it as a Millwall 11. Millwall put this out earlier that this was an under 21 friendly, and then for some reason they changed it to a Millwall 11. Although it was actually an under 21 game because the manager of the team was Kevin Nugent, who is the under 21s manager. Thus, it was an under 21s team. This is from millwallfc.co.uk. It's a match report from the game. Last gasp, friendly defeat for Millwall under 21s. The Millwall under 21s team were defeated 2-1 by Bromley at Hayes Lane on Saturday afternoon in awful weather. Awful weather, raining all day, still raining now. Managed by Kevin Nugent, see? The Lions were able to name Connell Truman and Tyler Burr in their starting lineup. So the only two senior pros are Connell Truman, third choice goalkeeper, who I don't think has actually played for Millwall yet, played for the under 21s, and Tyler Burry, who has played for the first team, but is set to leave soon, I guess. Alongside under 21 names such as Chin Ockley, Shamar Lawson and Nana Boateng. After a non-eventful first half, Millwall almost found that opener in the second through Carl Smith's free kick, but the strike cracked the crossbar before flying over. Jude Harfer's low strike then put Bromley 1-0 up just past the hour mark, but Seb Dross stepped off the substitutes bench to equalise with 7 minutes to play, nodding home from Oliver Evans' cross at the back post. However, George Alexander was to win and then convert a penalty kick seconds into stoppage time to win the game for the hosts. Yet Bromley won it right at the end of the game with a penalty kick. And yes, former Millwall youngster George Alexander, who was let go 2 seasons ago now, I think. So yeah, and this was the team: Truman, Walker, Trialist A, Smith, Grant, Ockley, Berry, Lawson, Leahy, Boateng, Cotton. The subs was Horsley, McKay, George Evans, the goalkeeper, not the first team George Evans. Trialist B, Drozd, Hood, Ollie Evans, Abdul Malik, Trialist C. And there you go, that was it. So, next game, first team, Charlton, Tuesday. This is going to be a tougher test. Charlton been turned around by the new manager. Just announced new owners. It's all going peachy for them. I'm sure, even though this is a pre-season friendly, they are almost certainly going to try and win this game. They're going to pull out all the stops now. Does it really matter? Not really. It's pre-season friendly. If we lose this game, still doesn't really count, does it? It's not an official game. And I'll happily, if you said to me, get in the playoffs or lose this game, well, just lose this game, get in the playoffs. And like, this game doesn't matter, does it? The only thing about this game is, if you haven't seen them already, seeing the new players, Nisbet, Casper Denor, is he going to feature? Wes Harding, the new signings that we've got, going down there and seeing them in the flesh, seeing the kits in the flesh as well, and more on that now, I think, because in this Bromley game, Connell Truman was wearing the new goalkeeper kit, the red one, or red and pink and purple. It's horrendous. I don't know if it's in these pictures. I did see it somewhere. So action from Bromley versus Millwall 11. Millwall under 21s took on Bromley at Hayes Lane on Saturday afternoon. Take a look at the best of the action from Kent. Hello? Is it in Kent? It's the London Borough of Bromley. So there you go. There's Abdul Malik. Chin Ockley. There, look, there's the kit. Connell Truman in that kit. Holy fucking shit. What is that kit? What is this kit? It very much looks like I don't know, 2012, the mascot logo, that kind of weird geometric shapes that kind of remind you of something, aren't actually meant to stand for anything. Yeah, like pink, purple, pink, dark pink, and purple. It's horrendous. But here's the thing: even though it's horrendous, if they haven't announced that they're selling this yet. If they do sell this might be one to buy, because this is the kind of kit that no one's gonna buy because it's so fucking horrendous. It might be worth just buying this and just sticking it in a drawer somewhere, because it's going to be a collector's item. And especially, I think they're not making long sleeve goalkeeper kits, even for the keeper here. I think he's got an undershirt on. I think it looks like it, because that would be a kind of weird sleeve to have at the end. Maybe it is like that. Yeah, I think that is actually like that. So on the elbows they've got like a pink thing, and it just looks weird. And they've got lines going down to the black cuff. Yeah, that is so bad, so bad. Yeah, there you go. Now that is one of the try lists. I think he looks like the guy we had on trial last year, who was from Tooting and Mitcham. Kind of similar. I'm not sure if it's the same guy. It might not be. But that's one of the try lists there. So who's that? Don't know. If you do know, put a comment below, please. Finley Cotton there. I'm not sure who that is actually. I get them confused all the time. Walker and Smith. I think that's Walker, and the other guy was Smith. This is Smith. No, is it the other way around? Nana Boateng, Seb Drozd, Jamal Lawson. There's Tyler Berry there. Hopefully he had a non-eventful game in terms of off the pitch stuff. We don't need any of that stuff going on. Tom Leahy, and we're back to being. So there you go. You can see every single photo had rain in it. Absolutely horrendous day. Moving on to this from londonnewsonline.co.uk, South London Press's online website. Mill boss asked if Kevin Nisbet will be their designated penalty taker this season. Well, in pre-season we've had 2 penalties and he's taken both of them. So I would say, yeah. Millwall manager Garrett has not made a call yet on whether Kevin Nisbet will be their designated penalty taker this season. The Scottish striker, signed for Hibernian in the summer, has converted spot kicks against Gillingham and Sutton United in friendly matches. Nisbet scored a hat-trick against Sutton on Tuesday night. Andres Vogelsam successfully scored a penalty against Reading last season, with Zion Fleming also a contender. Asked if Nisbet got the spot kick gig, Rowett told the South London Press, "I think it's a little bit too early to decide on, but he's shown a nice capability of looking very comfortable, stepping up to the penalty spot and executing, and that's really all he can do. When the season starts, if you're sat there with a debate over the likes of Flem, Voggy and Nisbet, then you're quite comfortable with whichever one took them. It's a decision of mine about who to put as the main penalty taker when I pick the first team of the season, which is still quite a long way off yet, though I'm sure he adds to the conversation. What he has shown is that he's a very good finisher. He's got that next level composure and finishing. We think he'll bring a lot to the team. Penalty taking is just one of the many assets that Kevin Nisbet will bring to Millwall." Yes, sir. Indeed. Now we're going to finish the video with this from southwarknews.co.uk. Bit of an interesting piece. Basically, the new guy at Southwark News, Kiro Evans, he's the new what do you call it, beat reporter covering Millwall for the Southwark News. He has done an interview with all the Mill podcasts, and here it is. So the best Mill podcast to get you through the rest of pre-season. Fans of the Lions have plenty of content to enjoy. The new championship campaign is fast approaching, and Millwall fans have a whole new season of football to look forward to. In the meantime, board supporters have no shortage of ways to get their fix of content, news, and opinion about the club. News that then has spoken to the most high-profile podcasts that revolve around Millwall ahead of the new season. They start with That Millwall Podcast. Mickey Simpson presents the That Millwall Podcast. He started it during lockdown to replicate the feeling of being at the pub discussing the game with your mates. The 47-year-old used to live in Bermondsey but is now in Kent and served as a fan on the board at Millwall for 2 years. Podcast name, That Millwall Podcast. What was the thinking behind the name? Ideally, I just wanted a simple name. The simplest name would be That Millwall Podcast, but that would be too familiar, so I just went with that. Because if people are talking about it in a pub or anywhere else, it would be, did you hear what was said on That Millwall Podcast last night? It flows quite easily. Who are your regular co-hosts or guests? My partner in crime is Omar, who I started it with. We now have Joe, Chris, Stephen, Ben, Dan, and Alex. When did you release your first episode, and why did you start the podcast? It was during lockdown, actually. The reason we started is that we missed all the conversation in the pub before and after games. So we started the show to try and capture that and carry on having conversations. So we used to do a live show called Friday Night Live, and that progressed into interviews with players and then into a standardised pod, and people liked it, and it's grown more and more every year. What has been your favourite podcast episode so far? There's been a few, but I would say one of the best episodes is when I got 5 members of the 72-73 team together who probably all hadn't been together in 30 years, and it was as if they'd never been apart. They were joking, the banter was still there, the stories were coming, they were feeding each other bits of stories when others would forget it. It was great. It was a really good eye-opener for seeing the camaraderie of what football brings you. These people live all over the world and they haven't really seen each other all together in years, and that 72-73 team were good as well. They nearly got promoted. What does your podcast do that differently to others? Why should people listen? We say it how it is. It's just Millwall fans talking about what you're discussing privately and publicly about the team. No one is beyond constructive criticism. The conversation you hear down the pub is pretty much the conversation we have on the podcast. Who is your favourite current Millwall player? I'll probably go Danny McNamara. I think Danny has had the boo boys, he's had the grief, he's come through and he's still there, he still fights. I like the others, Fleming and all that, but realistically, Danny Mac for me. And who's your favourite all-time Millwall player? Well, I could pick a few of them, but I'll probably go with Alex Ray. He was very open with us when he did an interview. He was definitely my favourite person to talk to. Or Brian King. They're both people I speak to on a regular basis, and they're proper gentlemen. I didn't really see either of them play, but of the people I've had the privilege of speaking to, they would probably be the ones. What is your favourite Millwall memory? After the London Bridge attacks, I helped to organise the 4 Millwall fans who were injured in the attack to get them down to the first game of the season, and Steve Kavanagh spoke to the FA and got them all presentation books with signed Millwall shirting, and they got invited into the director's box and chairman's lounge for the game. They came down and got a rapturous applause from the fans. What was your first match at the Den? I don't remember the year exactly, but it was a game against Manchester City. If you could change one thing about Millwall, what would it be? Millwall's real, the fans are real, everything about the club is real. It's the last bastion of working class clubs out there. We are what we are, but if there was one thing I would do, it would be for the club to work with the fan channels rather than keep us at arm's length. More interaction with us so we can give our listeners a little bit more in-depth coverage. Looks like Mickey's trying to get himself a free ticket in a press box there, doesn't it? I'm only joking. Actual Millwall podcast with a selfie taken from Bird Shit Corner there. I know it well. Nick Hart 62 could have a claim to hosting the longest running Millwall podcast. A retired housing officer who lives in East London started it 10 years ago, and his episodes reflecting on plenty of big Millwall moments over the last decade. His podcast is Achtung Millwall Podcast. What's the thinking behind the name? Well, they're a bit unfashionable nowadays, but I really liked U2's early 1990s album called Achtung Baby. It was a totally different style for them, and I liked the title, so I nicked it. The Acton Baby was a bit of a departure in sound for them, but I really enjoyed them back in the day. They became a bit cliched after a while, but I just really thought the title of that album had an impact and it would make a good title for a band scene or something. What are your regular co-hosts or guests? I like to get a wide range of voices on the show. You wheel me in conversation with an ever-changing cast, but most often with Harry Warren, Michael Avery, Neil Fissler, Graham Payne, and Aaron Paul when his BBC radio events allow. Many others too numerous to name too. I've known Aaron for 5 or 6 years now, and he's got a huge amount of knowledge. When did you release your first episode? Well, I think it was around 2013-ish. I don't remember what the first episode was, but it would have been maybe Kenny Jackett's era. I've got this thing of doing in-game comments as the matches go along. I kind of just chunder away while the game is going on with anything that goes through my head that's related to what I'm seeing. It can be a bit bizarre at times, I suppose. I was brought up in an era where you were brought up with a radio, and that's all there was. So when it was explained to me you can broadcast sound files on the internet and it's like the radio, I got a bit intrigued by it. Why did you start the podcast? Well, anyone who says there isn't a bit of an ego trip doing these things is not being truthful. But mainly, I wanted to get across my take on what following a club like Millwall means. The humour, the occasional triumphs, mediocrities, and sometimes despair. We get some money from advertising now, and the profits we make go to the Lions Food Hub. What has been your favourite episode so far? Well, episode 144, Leeds 3 Millwall 4 on January 20th, 2018. These matches are events in their own right. They are hard-edged and like a pantomime where you get the villains who you boo. We went to Leeds and they have this delusion that they are a major European power in football. It was a to and fro game. We got a late equaliser, then we won it in the last nick of the game through Jed Wallace. You get rare games where you think, this is why I follow football. You can't invent these situations. You wouldn't put them in if you were writing a movie. I caught up with Harry Warren at Ellen Road after to react on the podcast. What does your podcast do differently to others? Why should people listen? Well, as odd as this will sound, I'm not sure everyone will like Acting Millwall. Weird thing to say, I know, but I try to mix in a bit of life, the universe, and everything into my coverage of being a Lions fan. Who's your favourite current Millwall player? Zion Fleming, wonderfully talented and superbly enigmatic in a very Dutch way. Watch out for a main essay though, that boy will play at a high level, mark my words. Who's your favourite former Millwall player? Barry Kitchener, the epitome of a Millwall leader. He dominated the club, he's a major figure in Millwall history. He's like Sean Hutchinson, Jake Cooper, and from last season, Charlie Cresswell put together. Every player, when you start going to football, you think of gods, and Barry Kitchener was my Millwall god. What's your favourite Millwall memory? Winning promotion to the top flight in 1988, something I never thought I would see. What was your first match at the Den? Millwall 1, Portsmouth 0, March 1972. That was a big season for Millwall. We almost got promoted that season. Barry Bridges scored in the 52nd minute, I think. I've never been to a league football match before. An explosion of noise, the green pitch, white shirts. It was wonderful. If you could change one thing about Millwall, what would it be? More jet washing of the bird droppings in Block 1. No, you can't get rid of the bird shit corner. No one likes us talking. Here we go. Gary Staff joined the No One Likes Us Talking podcast a few years after its creation. He's a 47-year-old account manager who lives in Bracknell, and he has to travel 2.5 hours to get to the Den, having moved away from the area. Despite the long journey, he remains passionate about Millwall and enjoys hosting a podcast that explores all aspects of the club. Who are your co-hosts or guests? I'm only one of the hosts. The main guys who run it are called Eamon Barkley and George Lampy. They run the show behind the scenes, and Eamon is a host as well. George is like the chairman. We've also got Jeff Burnage, ex-Millwall chairman. We've got Phil Coleman, an ex-Millwall player. We also have fans and friends who are panellists: Bethany, Dawn, Dave, Stan, Ted and Pat. We have a good mix of people who come on regularly. Why did you start the podcast? Well, I came in about 6 or 7 years after it started. George and Eamon started it back in the day for a podcast called Lions Live. That started about 10 seasons ago. It wasn't the official club podcast, but it used to be recorded in the club. A few things changed, and they just moved to doing it as an independent thing. And eventually, the name changed in the 3 years since I was involved. I've gone from being a guest all the way to being a presenter and writing scripts. What's been your favourite podcast episode so far? My personal favourite is probably when I spoke to Lee Gregory, who's fantastic to talk to. What does your podcast do differently to others, and why should people listen? We talk about everything, not just the first team. We talk about the Lionesses, the LGBT team, the Lions Food Hub. We talk about the community. We talk about ex-players. So I think you'd get a little bit more from us, and we're not just focused on the first team. We're focused on the biggest picture as well. Who's your favourite current Millwall player? It's got to be Zion Fleming. I've got to say that, otherwise my son would kill me. Fleming is one of those players that excites me, and fingers crossed he stays for another season, and we get to enjoy him a little bit more. Saying that though, I can see Kevin Nisbet becoming the fans' favourite after White Sutton. Who's your favourite former Millwall player? I can go back to Teddy Sheringham, Tony Cascarino days, but I'd have to go Tim Cowell. He just came around at a good time for us when we were looking to push on. That whole team were just fantastic. What's your favourite Millwall memory? Well, it'd have to be the FA Cup semi-final, beating Sunderland up at Old Trafford. Yes, that was a lot better than the final, wasn't it? What was your first match of the day? It was Millwall versus Colchester, and I think we won 2-0, and that was in February 1980. If you could change one thing about Millwall, what would it be? It's the ongoing thing about the stadium. I just find the ground a bit boring. I would like to build in at the sides to grow a bit more of an atmosphere, so that would be my thing. But I like the new pictures of the ground coming through. What does he mean? What does he mean? Like, does he mean the new Bermondsey thing? Does he mean the pictures that they want to build it there when they're gonna build the corners? Wall talk. Lifelong Millwall fan Mark Litchfield is living the dream as the Lions official club journalist. He started the in-house podcast a few years ago with other members of the media team, providing compelling interviews with the manager, players and others involved with the club. What's the thinking behind the name? So we were brainstorming a few ideas and wanted something that had Millwall or Lions in the title. We came up with a few names, nothing seemed to stick, and eventually we came up with the name Wall Talk. Who are your regular co-hosts or guests? Well, the regular hosts are myself and Max. We did have a journalist from the Sun called Paul Jiggins on with us before, but unfortunately passed away about 18 months ago. So we managed to get Byron Webster as his replacement, who's a former Millwall player. He's coming to the end of his playing career and wants to go into the media once he retires. He adds a very good sense of humour to the podcast, and he's very good at what he does. When did you release your first episode? So the first episode, we had Gary Rowett on it. I don't know the exact date, but I'm going to go around maybe like December 2020. Why did you start the podcast? Well, I've worked here for 6.5 years now, and it's something I wanted to do for quite a while. I've seen other clubs do podcasts, and I like to think I'm quite knowledgeable about Millwall. So I was putting two and two together, but it never really materialised until around a couple of years ago, around the time of COVID. We were just coming back from an away trip to Swansea City, so we had a lot of time in the car to talk about it. And that's how we come up with the name and the format of it. It just snowballed from there. We're about 35 to 40 episodes in now, and hopefully going from strength to strength with it. What's been your favourite episode so far? Oh, well, we've had a few very good episodes. Some are very funny, some go along the more serious lines. And you've got time to sit down and talk to someone in a way you usually wouldn't when interviewing them after a game or whatever. I think my favourite one is probably having Neil Harris on. He's a club legend, both as a player and a manager. He's a personal friend of mine, so it was great to have him on. And we actually had to split the podcast into two. It was so long. What does your podcast do differently? We get a lot of big guests on, the people that fans will want to hear from. And we have people on there who are knowledgeable and passionate about the club. They love doing what they do. Who's your favourite current Millwall player? Well, it's difficult. As a fan, you only see them as footballers, but I see them as the person as well as a footballer. If you're going by as a person, I would probably say Ryan Leonard's a great guy. He's got time for you no matter what you want, when you want it. Whether I can say he's my favourite or not, I don't know, but I'm very excited by the prospect of Kevin Nisbet and what he can bring to the team. Who's your favourite former Millwall player? Definitely Neil Harris. In the 28 years I've been coming down here, I've seen promotions, cup finals, European appearances, playoff wins, Wembley visits, So I've been very fortunate in my time supporting the club, and I've seen many good players. But Neil Harris is the all-time leading goal scorer for the club. He scored winning goals so many important games, and then coming back as a manager, he won the League One playoffs and nearly got us into the Championship playoffs. The list is endless when it comes to Neil Harris. What's your favourite Millwall memory? Well, here we go, another one. April the 4th, 2004, the FA Cup semi-final at Old Trafford against Sunderland. We beat them 1-0, and it was literally one of the greatest days of my life supporting Millwall and in my life in general. It was just absolutely incredible to find little old Millwall in an FA Cup final, and that was beyond people's wildest dreams. The semi-final was very nervy, but looking back, you had grown men in floods of tears, people hugging each other who had never met and would never meet again, people kissing, cuddling. It was one of those days that I'll remember for the rest of my life. What was your first match at the Den? My first game was actually an away match at Crystal Palace in 1995. My first game at the Den, and therefore my second Millwall game, was against Port Vale in January 1996. That was quite a famous game with Millwall fans. It was the debut of the two Russians that we signed, called Vasily Kulkov and Sergei Uran. They came with a lot of promise and potential, but completely and spectacularly failed to live up to it. I think they played a handful of games and maybe scored a goal between them, and then they left. So there you go. That is it. So not a bad little piece rounding up. I don't know if you knew any of these, and what if you've ever listened to any of these. Wall Talk, I think, is just on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's not on YouTube. Oh, it's on Mill TV. Mill TV or Mill TV Plus, probably Mill TV. Actual Mill's on YouTube, but it's just audio. So I think is No One Likes Us Talking. I believe that's on YouTube. But again, I think that's just audio. And what was the other one? First one, I will obviously that Millwall Podcast is on YouTube, and Twitter as well. So there you go, Millwall Podcast. Everything you need to know. And on that note, thank you for watching, and goodbye.